Hey gardeners, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to cover something that I haven't talked about I don't know if I've ever talked about this, to be honest, and it's something that people bring up all the time, and it's one of the most important things, and it is how expensive reptiles are. The reason why I always put it off is because when someone asks you how much it costs to take care of your reptiles, it's really hard to come up with a number because there are so many different expenses coming from so many different areas. Sometimes you need to buy in bulk and it's really expensive, and then other months you're kind of set and you don't really have to get that many things. It also depends on the species you're keeping and how many you have. So my expense number may not be the same as any others. So we're going to go over all of the different possible expenses of things that you're going to have to pay for when you're keeping a reptile, and the prices for those things, and also the frequency of how much you're going to have to purchase these things, just to get a good idea of how much money you're going to be spending. So the first thing that most people focus on the most is just the expense of the reptile itself. So reptiles can be pretty expensive, but some of them are common and they might be really cheap, especially if you're getting something wild caught or just something at like a pet store that's very common. If you're getting something really rare or a high-end morph, obviously it's going to cost more money. So for this, I would recommend always getting a captive bred animal. They will cost a little bit more, but down the line it's going to save you money, because when you're getting a wild caught animal, it's going to be subjected to anything in the wild and diseases and bugs and mites and all of these other internal illnesses that you may not be aware of by looking at the animal, but those are going to really cost you a lot of money and put you through a lot of stress down the line. So it's better to pay a little bit more to get a captive bred animal. The next thing that most people pay attention to besides the animal is the enclosure, because obviously you have to put it in some type of enclosure. Enclosures can be pretty expensive, even if you're just using a tank. Tanks are now very expensive these days, and they're honestly not the most suitable option. Now it's best to get something that's PVC or wood with front opening doors, and that offers way more space to your animals. So if you're looking at getting an enclosure like that, it's usually going to be at least around $300, depending on the size and the material and what animal you're keeping. So enclosures can be pretty expensive, so that's why it's also important to just keep in mind that like not just the cost of the animal is important, but what you're going to be putting it in as well is going to cost you a pretty penny, most likely, if you're planning to take proper care of your animal, at least. Because some people are like, oh, it can live in this, but we want to strive to give them the best life possible, which means getting them a suitable enclosure at the very least. The next thing that can become pretty pricey is lighting, heating, and UVB lighting. So every species is a little bit different. Some of them don't require UVB, some of them don't require heat, some of them are comfortable to room temperature. Some people want to keep live plants and they need LED lighting in order to keep those plants alive. So all of these different things can become pretty expensive. When you're looking at heat alone, a fixture for a heat bulb runs around $20 to $30, though you can get fixtures from like Home Depot much cheaper. If you get off-brand non-reptile heating and lighting, you can get cheaper things at Home Depot when it comes to basking. People get heat bulbs, I believe, from Home Depot as well. I just typically stick with getting something that's reptile heat just because I want to make sure it has UVA in it. So if you're looking at a fixture for a reptile, it's going to be around $20 to $30, give or take. But then when you're looking at the bulb, it can be around $8 to $15. So yeah, every time they go out, it's kind of annoying, but it's an expense that you need to replace because they obviously need their heat. When it comes to UVB, it is a little bit more expensive, especially if you don't have a fixture for the UVB. When you buy the fixture, it's usually around $70, and then the light is usually around $30. So it can be pretty expensive when you're getting the first UVB fixture and bulb. It is important to remember, unless you have a solar meter, which solar meters are like $200 to $300, super expensive. They basically measure the output of UVB coming out of the bulb. If you don't have a solar meter, then it is so important to make sure that you are replacing your UVB bulb at least every 6 months to a year, because the bulb will be on and look like it's working, but the amount of UVB coming out of it will decrease over time and we can't visually see it. So that's why it's best to replace it to make sure your reptile is still getting that UVB that they desperately need. So it's going to be another 30 bucks for the new bulb every single time you need to replace it. There are also heat pads. I'm pretty sure they run around like 25 to 35 bucks. It does depend on the size that you're getting, obviously. And if you are using a heat pad, you also need to be using a thermostat to regulate it, because the heat pads unregulated will get to astronomical temperatures that are not safe for reptiles. So they have to be regulated, and thermostats you can get online for around 15 to 17 bucks. It does depend. They have some that are higher grade that are obviously going to cost more. Then when you're looking at LED, if you're wanting to keep your plants alive, you're looking at around $70 for the LED bulbs. It does depend on the size. You can get something a little cheaper or more expensive, but all of these things combined ends up being pretty expensive. And it's one of those annoying things when you have to replace all of these items, especially if a heat bulb goes out. Like, it can be an expense that pops up out of nowhere that you have to take care of. And that's just something you have to deal with. And then UVB, you do have to remember to be replacing that every 6 months to a year. So it's just things like this that add on at the most random times that you're not fully aware of, and that can make it harder to track how much the reptiles are actually costing you. Next things that are going to be costing you money is obviously you're going to have to feed your animals. It does depend on the species, of course. If you have an insectivore and you need to be buying bugs, it can end up adding up, especially for someone like me, because I have so many different animals and I like to offer variety. So I like to get a lot of dubia roaches and black soldier fly larvae and superworms and crickets. So all of these things can add up. And then of course, hornworms, because they need their hornworms, they love them, and silkworms. All of these good things, they end up adding up a lot. So I typically buy my bugs every 2 weeks. I go to a local pet store and I buy and stock up on my bugs. I usually spend around I would say between 30 to 50 usually when I'm getting my bugs and stocking up for the week. But I'm also buying live mice because I have 2 picky snakes that will not eat frozen thawed. So I have to buy the live mice from that store as well. The rest of my snakes will eat frozen thawed, and that can cost a lot. If you spend over $100 in bulk, you do get free shipping. Otherwise, the shipping is like $30. So, yeah, it's best to just buy in bulk and save the $30. It usually lasts me, I don't know. See, I don't write this stuff down, but when I buy in bulk for my snakes, it lasts me at least 6 months, but I'm spending like $130 every 6 months is what I would say, give or take. So that's expensive just for feeding some snakes. It's actually what inspired me to do this video, because I was not planning on spending $130, but I realized, oh, my snakes need to eat. And I'm like, reptiles can be so expensive. And then that's why this video is happening. Last are vegetables. If you have a reptile that's just eating vegetables for the most part, that's probably gonna be the cheapest thing for sure. Especially tortoises, they love their vegetables and fruits. So if you're able to get stuff like that from the grocery store, that's gonna be cheaper than the bugs or the rats or pretty much anything else. So yeah, if you're looking to save some money, maybe get something that is a little vegetarian and just needs some, bearded dragons as well are great because they love their veggies, but they also need bugs to their diet as well. So that's why these things are important to consider when you're getting an animal. Next up, you'll be needing supplementation. So this is calcium with D3, calcium without D3, a multivitamin. These things run around like $13 to $15 and they do last a long time, but it's just something that you're gonna have to get right off the start to make sure you have it for your animal. You'll also be needing live or fake plants. Fake plants surprisingly can be very expensive, especially if you're going somewhere like Michael's. It really does depend where you're getting your fake plants from, but they can be expensive. Also, live plants can be kind of expensive. I usually recommend going to Home Depot because you can get them for pretty good prices at Home Depot, but you will most likely spend like at least $50 to $100 to fill out an enclosure with some plants at Home Depot. It is not cheap. Like, it's going to be an expense for sure. Obviously, you'll be needing decorations and enrichment and different things around the enclosure. This stuff, it really depends where you're getting it from, and you could be spending like $50 to $250 depending on what you want to do with the enclosure and how you want it to look. Substrate is something that is also expensive. Usually when you're getting a bag, it's around like 25, 30 bucks, but you may need multiple bags to fill out one enclosure. And if you're keeping multiple enclosures, that adds up for sure. Cork bark, wood, even leaf litter, all of these natural things that you would think don't cost anything. When you're getting reptile safe ones, they're very expensive. Cork bark is insanely expensive. Any type of just wood, like you find a stick and you're like, wow, this is great. And then you look at the price and it's like 50 bucks. That's how it goes. Even leaf litter can be so expensive, and we obviously want to use a lot, and we have a lot of animals most of the time. So buying a lot of that can cost a lot of money. The next thing is misting. Some reptiles may not need this necessarily, but a lot of them do. You can get a misting system. Those can be very expensive. I'm currently trying to sell mine because I never even used it. I just get a cheap one from Home Depot that I can spray my reptiles down with, and I think it's around like 10 bucks. So that's a really good option. Or you can get like the Mist King for 260, and it just does everything for you. Those are awesome. I just never utilize mine, but they can be pretty expensive. Something else you'll need is a temperature gun. Temperature guns are so important. You can get them on Amazon for like 15 bucks. ReptiSafe, something you want to be putting in all of the water that you're going to be giving any of your reptiles to dechlorinate it, is going to be around like 8 to 10 bucks. Feeding tongs depends on the brand and where you're getting it. I would say it's around like 8 to 10 bucks. But if you're losing them constantly, everyone is always losing their tongs. So you may need to just have one spot that you put them, or just buy them all the time if you're losing them, which can be expensive depending on how much you're losing them. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is something that a lot of people don't really think about when they're getting their animal, and that is vet expenses. Especially if you have a reptile, it's going to have to go to an exotic veterinarian, which is going to cost even more because it is a specialty. So another thing to keep in mind, if you make an appointment, that's much better than just walking in, because if you walk in like emergency style with an issue, they'll charge you $100 right off the bat just for walking in the door. Maybe some of them are different, but that's what I experienced in the past. And doing different tests, blood tests and things for reptiles is very specialized. They're very small, fragile things. Putting them under for surgery is expensive. It can cost a lot of money. So that's why I highly recommend making sure you're getting a healthy animal versus one that could potentially have health issues, because exotic veterinarians are going to cost a lot of money and be very expensive, and a lot of people are not prepared for that. And that pretty much completes today's video. If you guys can think of any other important expenses that pop up, please go ahead and leave it in the comment section. I hope that this video will help some people out and bring some awareness to how much reptiles really cost, because when people ask me, there is not a set number that I can just give, because all these expenses are coming from different areas at different times, at different frequencies, depending on species and size. So that's why it's really impossible to give one set number. But I hope that this brought some insight, and I hope it helped, and I will see you guys in the next video.